Hey everyone, it's me, Sarah, your Christian forgiveness coach, and you're watching Forgive Everyone for Everything Every Day Right Away. And today I want to talk about boundaries. And this is such a great topic and something that I've learned a lot about recently and in this past year. And I know it's something that I'll do more episodes on in the future as I gain more experience and wisdom around boundaries. So for now, here's what I have to offer you that we often find ourselves having to forgive the same things over and over again, and that could be a signal that we need to set a healthy boundary. But first we need to understand like what boundaries are and then how to set them and enforce them. So this is really important part, I believe, of forgiveness work, understanding what they are and how not to implement them can really help us get in touch with what's going on with us. And it can also help us separate what we need from our need to control the other people in our lives. Okay. So, a lot of times boundaries are mistaken for a way to control someone else. And I have certainly used boundaries in this way myself. I have had to learn that one, it is not my job to control anyone else. And two, I am allowed to set up a boundary, but that boundary is for me, not them. Only me. And that's the key. People get to do whatever they want. I get to decide what I do and don't want to allow in my life. So boundaries sometimes, to me anyway, seem counterintuitive. Like, will it separate me from other people? But without healthy boundaries, we can actually really struggle and create a lot of conflict in our relationships, which ultimately is a separation. So healthy boundaries can actually protect our relationships and create closer, more meaningful relationships. So having boundaries in relationships is not a sign that the relationship isn't healthy. In fact, I think it's the opposite. Having the freedom to acknowledge and communicate your boundaries is imperative to intimacy in a relationship. So, what is a boundary? So, I like to think of like a land plot or a line between like your house, your home plot, and your neighbors. It's a line that clearly defines what side is yours and what side is theirs. If you live in an apartment or a condo, then that line would be the wall. So you can think of personal boundaries as being like those same lines just between two people. So this boundary can be physical or it can be emotional. So your boundaries are to protect you physically or emotionally. It's the line that if it is crossed, you will then take action to protect yourself. In other words, if someone does or says something you want to protect yourself from, you can make a request that they don't do that thing, not to control them, but to protect yourself. And that there will be a consequence of what you will do, again, to protect yourself if they cross that boundary line again. So let's give a couple examples of a physical boundary. So let's say you're driving in a car with your friend and they light up a cigarette. So for health reasons, you're not okay with this for yourself. So you tell your friend, hey, if you're going to smoke in the car, can you please pull over and let me out? So you have a boundary that you won't ride in a car with a person who's smoking. You're not saying they can't smoke. You're not telling them what to do. You're just telling them what you will do for yourself if they choose to do that. Okay. So, an example of an emotional boundary might be you're having a conversation with someone and they're getting upset and they start yelling at you. You say, I do not want to be yelled at, so I'm going to leave this conversation until you calm down, and then we can talk again when you do. So again, you took action. You didn't tell them what to do. You didn't say, yell back at them, stop yelling at me. You just said, hey, if you're going to yell at me, this is what I'm going to do. And you told them what you were going to do if they chose to continue doing that behavior. Okay. So I want to give a couple examples of what a boundary is not. So one might be like, hey, honey, if you don't take out the trash, well, then I'm not going out to dinner with you. Not a boundary. That's control and manipulation. That's like another example. Well, another example of that might be like, if I text you and you don't respond immediately, I'm going to stop being your friend. Not a boundary. That's more control. I'm not saying it's not okay to make requests like, hey, honey, would you please take out the trash? Or, hey, friend, would you please try to acknowledge my texts? But here's the key. Our happiness cannot ride on whether or not they comply with said request. Adults are allowed to do what they want, and boundaries are not meant to be used as ultimatums. We don't like to be told what to do. We don't like to be controlled. We don't like to be forced, and neither do other people. Okay. So now something that I have learned about boundaries was that I really had to put some thought into what my personal boundaries actually are. Like some were really obvious and even seemed to be unspoken, such as when I got married, it was just kind of understood that we were exclusive in the relationship. We were not going to seek intimacy outside of the marriage. That seems to be a pretty common unspoken boundary. So much so that we often don't have a conversation about it, like what we would do if that ever happened, because like, let's face it, we don't ever expect that to happen. And the same thing could be said about abuse. Like we never enter into a relationship like expecting to be abused, or I'm guessing we probably would not have agreed to be in the relationship in the first place if we knew beforehand that that abuse was going to occur. So we don't talk about it. We don't feel like we need to set that boundary, right? So then the unthinkable happens. And sadly, it so often does. We have infidelity, we have abuse, and then we feel so lost and confused, we don't know how to handle it because we never addressed it and we never gave it some real thought as to how we would want to handle it if it did happen. So some boundaries we are very aware of and we do make them known up front. We might tell a partner, hey, if you ever cheat on me, I will, dot, 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 fill in the blank, whatever it is that you decide to do. But then if it actually happens years down the road, we actually might choose to handle it differently than we thought we would. And that's okay. You're totally allowed to set new boundaries as you go through life. So maybe you would leave, or maybe you would decide to forgive and work on it, go to counseling. If this continues, then I will leave. If you don't want to change your behavior, then I will leave. Whatever that looks like for you. So, have you given real deep thought into what your personal boundaries are, like in relationships, at work, maybe regarding your health? So, I encourage you to do so. You get to decide what is best for you, but really get in touch with yourself and ask yourself, what are your boundaries? And that little 3-letter magic question, why? And then when you know why, you can ask, do I like my reasons? And then here's my best advice for you. Have your own back. Follow through and stay true to yourself. Weak boundaries create turmoil in relationships. So get clear, and then you can communicate them, and then you can follow through for you. All right. Till next time. Bye.